relax, and enjoy Phoebe Bridgers and Connor Oberst on Turned Out a Punk. Oh my God, my throat.
Connor, Phoebe, Connor, thank you both so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, it's a true honor to have you both on the show because the new Surprise record is fantastic. And but also, Connor, I've talked to you many years ago in a much more restrained environment at my old job as a VJ. Phoebe, I've never spoken to yourself, and I just can't wait to dive into this. Because there's two of you, I'm going to have to pick someone to start. So I've picked a number in my head between 1 and 10, and whoever gets closest to it will be the person who starts. Is that fair? Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah.
That seems fair, yeah.
Awesome. So the number in my head is chosen. Phoebe, what's your number?
7.
Connor,
mine is 4.
The number was 5.
Yeah.
I will post a picture. I will post a picture of me holding up the number with the number 5 on it to prove that I did not lie.
You seem trustworthy. We believe you.
I've got kids. You know, if I'm not trustworthy, I've really headed down the wrong path for the future generation. But I'm going to start it off the way they all start off, which is, in this case, Connor, how'd you get into punk?
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you ever came across the genre?
Yeah, I guess my oldest brother, was really into music, and he really loved the Clash, and I think that's when I first kind of heard that term used. But we also would go. There was like one cool record store in my town that's no longer there, sadly, R.I.P. called the Antiquarium, and the guy that worked there, he kind of called everything punk rock that he thought was good. You know what I mean? So this is kind of like early 90s, so this was like kind of pre even like, I don't know, like indie rock wasn't really a term, but I think a lot of that stuff that they were playing or like I was hearing in the, it was like pretty wide. Like I think of it does. I guess it doesn't. When I think of those records I got into then, it wasn't like, I don't know, maybe what would be conjured up by like the word punk rock, like Uncle Tupelo or something. That's like, I guess that's punk rock.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's the thing is it's like it gets codified at a certain point, but it's such a broad umbrella term.
Yeah, totally. So I always just think of anything that's like, a little rough around the edges and maybe a little subversive in its ideas. It's like, there's, Woody Guthrie's punk rock. It's like a lot of shit's punk rock.
How about yourself, Phoebe? Do you remember the first time you came across it?
Dude, honestly, probably Avril Lavigne. Like, I remember hearing Avril Lavigne on the radio and then like going into my brother's room and stealing his cargo shorts. And like I wore them to school every day.
Yeah.
In like, 5th grade. But I kind of had a similar relationship to it. My mom is really cool and showed me a lot of my favorite music. So then she would take me to this festival in San Francisco called Hardly Strictly. And we saw the Knitters, which is like X's country band.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked it. And then she was like, well, actually, they're this punk band called X. And they were like one of my favorite punk bands when I was a kid. But yeah, unfortunately, my entry level was probably Avril. But then it got pretty cool after that, I think.
Avril's cool.
Yeah, Avril's cool.
Avril's cool. Have you heard her like saying that she's not punk when she's like a baby? It's so good. The interview, she's like, it's not punk to call yourself punk. It's great.
It's funny because like she actually, when she got the band, kind of when things started going and she had the band with her, all the band were people from different punk bands and screamo bands, like members of Grade and all sorts of stuff in there. So
it makes sense.
It goes deep. There are some Avril Lavigne punk connections, and much like Avril Lavigne and the Clash, those are two blips where like underground music kind of bubbled up to the mainstream and drew a bunch of people in. Like you kind of need those things to happen in order to feed the next generation of kids.
For sure.
Sure, yeah.
Connor, where did you kind of go from like, going to this record store and getting into this sort of insurgent stuff? Like what was your, obviously you had an older brother who was kind of into it. Were you going to concerts already or were you like aware of, like stuff happening locally?
Yeah. I would go, I saw a lot of concerts, but weirdly, mostly like local, and if it was touring bands, it was pretty like DIY, like small bands. Like we would go. There was one kind of like all ages place called the Cog Factory that's also gone now, but we would it probably, I don't know, like maybe fit like 100 people or something. It's just like a black box, shitty PA. Actually, I had a PA that we, like in high school, my bands would practice, and the guys that ran the club like knew that I kind of had like an okay PA, and occasionally they would like call me and be like, our shit's broken, like bring your PA down. So like I got, I did like, quote unquote sound for like Brainiac once with my like PA, and like just we'd see like, I don't know, I saw a lot of like local shows, I guess. And a lot of it I think would be considered punk. I mean, Omaha was like the scene was kind of so small that everything, it wasn't weird to have like kind of like acoustic person on the same bill as like a total punk band or like a metal band or whatever. I mean, there just wasn't, it's not like there was enough places to play that like it got very like tribal or like divided. So I think that was kind of cool about it. I think all the music sort of existed, and it wasn't a lot of competition. It was like everyone was supportive. So yeah, I think I did see a bunch of punk back then.
It's kind of amazing too, because when the scene you're out of and yourself and like all Faint, Cursive, everyone starts kind of getting attention on sort of a national and international level. I guess it's reflective of the fact that it wasn't such a uniform sonic scene. The fact that all these bands sound completely different yet are all tied to the same place and scene.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that was just it. It was like, the I guess the connection was just that we were all friends and from the same little whatever town, so that was enough. We didn't have to like, sound like each other necessarily or anything like that. But yeah, it's cool.
Phoebe, how about yourself? Like, once you get your, Avril Lavigne, you kind of find out about this, you see the Knitters. I guess that's like an amazing jumping in point. Where'd you kind of go with this newfound knowledge that you're armed with?
I grew up really close to a venue in LA called The Smell.
Oh yeah.
Which it's an appropriate name for sure. Yeah, I went to a lot of shows, and then I played in this band. Like my best friend growing up, like we were friends when we were little kids. We were on a soccer team, and then like first day of high school, we recognized each other. And her name's Haley, and she had like shaved off her eyebrows and was wearing like platform shoes, and she was so fucking scary. Like everyone was scared of her, but I knew her. And then we got super close in high school. She was like the scary goth kid. And then she started a band called Sloppy Jane, that I started playing bass in. And yeah, we would have to like drive 2 hours with a PA in the back of our car, because I had a similar thing where I was the kid with PA.
Yeah.
So we'd drive it to like Reseda and play in like someone's basement, with like their dad like standing weirdly in the corner, like uncomfortable that everybody's drinking or whatever. We played with so many funny bands. We played with this band called Girl Pusher, which is basically like a drummer and then this like tiny white girl screaming like rap basically, but like it was so and she keeps like pushing him over. It was,
but she kept pushing the drummer over.
Yeah, she was just like really mad, but in kind of like a, I don't know, not as much of like, oh, it's punk, it's a show, it's gonna be good. She was like really upset.
Just unhinged.
She was unhinged.
But I can't think of a more appropriate name for a band.
Yeah, totally.
And so, some of the other bands you were playing with at that time, I guess it's like, what was Sloppy Jane sound like?
So
they're awesome.
I'm gonna let Connor describe it.
Well, I mean, I've heard some of the records are just, I mean, it does kind of like,
it is
like punk.
Yeah, we started kind of like more punk as like kind of just straight to the bloodstream, like fucking like 3 chords and screaming but like pop melodies, and then it kind of morphed over time. I think that's why they needed a better bassist for sure. It like morphed into this more like complex, weird like art project almost. Like now she's doing these tours. They're like a 9-piece. They live in Brooklyn and she's doing these tours with her band where they play strings in like caves.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
they record in caves only.
Yeah, dude. It's insane. But yeah,
Cave
that's
core.
fucking punk rock right
Yeah.
it is fun.
Connor, what was your first band called? Like,
What
did you
was
ever
that?
have
Sorry.
like I know you got pulled up on stage to perform, but did you have like a band before that? Did you have like a
Oh yeah,
an
I had a band called Commander Venus in high school, and we actually ended up. I mean, we made like 2 records, and we ended up weirdly like signing with this label, this New York label called Grass Records, and like
Oh yeah. Put
yeah,
up
like went
15.
out. Yeah, they had a bunch of bands, like yeah, like the Wrens and Brainiac, and there was a band. Actually, the reason we kind of knew about them is there was a band called Mousetrap from Omaha that was on that label too, and yeah, they actually put out a bunch of cool music. But yeah, we put out one record ourselves, and then we made one record for them, and so like that was my first experience like going to South by Southwest, and like we actually recorded our second record like out here in New York, like or in New Jersey at this studio called Water Music. I don't know if that still exists, but yeah. So it was my first band, I guess. Tim
Well,
Casher from Cursive was in the band with me, so it's like me and Tim and Rob Nanzel, who like runs Saddle Creek's basically his label. He stole our label, so he owns that label now. Yeah, it's cool.
it's funny because like Grass Records to me is one of those weird labels that it almost springs up and it's like it was like an already established indie powerhouse. Like it didn't really like seem to come from anywhere to me. Like what was the deal with that label? Was it a subsidiary?
Well, it was. I think it was like part of like Dutch East India or whatever that distribution company was.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I mean this woman Camille was like the A&R, and she was really cool and kind of crazy, but she was very sweet. Like we just sent her, like when we made our first CD or whatever, we like we got it was like right after like Valentine's Day, and me and Tim went to like Target or whatever, or like the grocery store, and we bought all the old um the like heart-shaped boxes with the
Hmm.
candy, and then we like put our CD in there and like wrote love letters to like our favorite labels. So it was like Sub Pop and Matador and Grass, because of like we liked the bands. And Camille, like bless her heart, like opened up the thing and like listened to it, and called my parents' house, because that's where I live, because I was 14, and she's like called the landline, and she was talking to me, and when she figured out that she thought that I was a woman and like an adult because of the way my voice sounded.
Yeah, because you're a kid.
And then when she figured out I was a 14-year-old boy, she like screamed and was like, "What the fuck?" And weirdly got more excited and signed us. So it was cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, that label is like one of those deep cut labels that I'm slowly trying to collect all the records on. Like the Germs tribute, like weird records on that thing.
Yeah, they had tons of bands. I mean, there was a lot of bands. I mean, yeah, I feel like yeah, for me it was like the Wrens and Brainiac and Sunbrain, which is like was Dave Dondero's first band, and yeah, there was so many bands. Yeah, 15, they were on there. Yeah,
Toadies.
Toady, yeah, it was bunch of bands.
Very weird
Not
label.
Yeah, they were pretty eclectic. But I would say they were. I mean, you would consider them like a punk label, right? I guess I would.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Well, I think it's also fascinating that both, and Phoebe, you too, like come into that scene, the smell scene. That's like that to me is emblematic of what punk rock is, where there's all these bands playing there kind of ostensibly under the banner of punk rock, but sonically no one's trying to copy anyone's shit and no one's playing by the same playbook.
Yeah, for sure.
What were some of the bands that you kind of, when you first started going there that really, inspired you, or bands that you were like into?
Well, I know No Age is like kind of from there. They would play every
Mm.
once in a while. That was cool. But then most of the time it was just like, people like us, like people would come to the show because there was a show happening, not like for a specific band.
Yeah.
But I remember Harmony Tividad from Girlpool. She had like a folk punk band for a minute that would play the same shows as us, and there was also this other venue called Narnia with a G.
Okay.
That's
Oh
a
my
tight
god,
name.
that was rough.
Narnia.
And that was even crazier because it would be like occasional real bands, but then sometimes it would just be like someone like screaming their poetry, and you're like, oh wait, this is the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like other smell bands that I've seen. Who else? I don't like all those like lollipop sort of bands. Yeah, wow, can't think of like any band names. That's
No,
cool.
it's cool because it
Prepare
smells like.
podcast.
No, don't worry. I'm never prepared for this podcast at all. So, but it's funny though with the once again, like you're saying, it's like a real crapshoot at the smell, like who's going to be there any given night, and especially at different time periods when, it wasn't like the hot time for like a bunch of bands kicking. It would be, yeah, like everything from Girl Pusher to No Age.
Yeah, totally.
When did you start just, playing music? Like what was the impetus? Did you grow up in a household where music was kind of like always present?
Yeah, my mom was like obsessed with music for sure. She was kind of into like Laurel Canyon singer-songwriter scene.
Hmm.
But it led very easily into punk rock and into like, stuff that I would end up really resonating with. And yeah, she like made me get piano lessons, and then oh, someone's at the door. She made me get piano lessons, and then I hated piano like so much, and so I like rebelled and like wanted to take guitar when I was 10. So yeah.
So you started playing at 10 years old.
Well, I think I like got a guitar. I think I learned like 3 chords, and then didn't really start playing until I was like 13 or 14.
Well, that's still three more than I know to this day. What at 10 years old, what were some of the stuff that you were listening to? Was it just like stuff your mom was playing you, or like what were some of the things that were making you kind of want to play guitar?
um, hmm. Guitar specifically, probably like Joni Mitchell, Jackson Brown, like Neil Young.
Mhm.
Neil Young, I thought was super punk rock. I remember the first time I
He is
ever,
super punk rock.
but I remember wanting like one of the first riffs I ever learned was for Hey Hey My My. I was
Mhm.
so pumped. It's just like the super dirty guitar on Rust Never Sleeps.
Yeah.
I thought it was like so badass. And then of course I like love Nirvana. I found like a really disturbing like photo of me when I think probably this summer I discovered Nirvana, where it's just like I was like, oh, I'm just gonna be me, but like greasy. But I'm like 10, so it's just like goofy. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Uh, so how about yourself, Connor? When did you first start playing music? Like, were your brothers playing music too?
Yeah, my oldest brother Matty always played in bands, and my dad played in band or he played music, not professionally, but he was like he had a band that would like to make extra money on the weekends and stuff. They'd like play weddings and things, like cover band basically. But there was always guitars and piano, and my brother's band would like practice in our basement, and older neighbor kids like next door had a band, actually like some of the guys that would later be in Cursive and stuff. So yeah, I was lucky to kind of have a lot of people to tag along with. I was like the novelty like little kid that they drug around with them. So yeah.
He must have been super jealous when at 14 you end up getting signed to like this legit record label with your first band.
Yeah, I mean it's when I think back to how it all happened, it was pretty crazy, like because it was like all of our friends, everyone was just very I guess just very motivated to like make music and get out there. I mean, everyone toured and played anywhere we could play and put out our own records. And like Mike Mogus, who plays in Bright Eyes with me, him and Ted Stevens, who's in Cursive, they had a band called Lullaby for the Working Class that was like our first friends bands that they signed to like this label Bar None, and they like we were the first band of our friends to like tour Europe, and they really like had it going on. And then obviously like all the shit Kasher was doing, and then Cursive, they kind of signed, I forget, they signed to some label, what was it called, like Crank or something, or I don't know, but
was it Crank? Yeah, that's what
they definitely did like something with Crank, but maybe they were on I don't know, it's like we were all on different, like we all thought we had to sign to other labels, but we were like at the same time we were still putting out our own like 7 inches. And I remember like even like the Commander Venus record, like Saddle Creek put out the vinyl, like we paid for our own vinyl. And so we kind of had like the label was kind of like in conjunction with us being on other labels. And then at some point we realized like, oh, we can just actually be on our own label. And so, by like 2000, we kind of all like came home and started doing the label like for real, I guess, the Saddle Creek stuff.
Do you think it's because it's like, you mentioned Omaha, and I'm trying to think of old Omaha punk bands like Digital Sex, and I'm trying to think of some other ones. But
damn, that's deep,
dude. That band's incredible. That 7-inch and that LP are like, I think, 2 of the most underrated American independent records.
That's awesome, man. There'll be some happy campers hear this podcast.
But like and correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like there weren't as many bands that kind of made it out until your kind of generation.
Yeah, there was. Well, Mousetrap was, like I'm saying, this band that I guess people have kind of forgotten about now, but they were on Grass and they toured. We thought of them as like successful, but I don't know how much they were. Oh, and then of course, your boys, 311, they're from Omaha.
My boys.
They
definitely.
they actually kind of cheated. They like moved to LA and like got signed and famous. So we always kind of thought of them as like hats, like they bailed on Omaha, which is fine. I mean, I did too, like as soon as I could, basically. But yeah, so yeah, I guess not a lot of sort of big name people. Well, like Matthew Sweet, do you remember him? He was from from Lincoln, but yeah.
He also played in another. I'm trying to remember his band because he was in some other band before that too. Anyway, but I digress there. But like I think it's kind of like obviously Los Angeles, where you're from Phoebe, and Omaha seems like very different kind of musical environments to kind of come out of it. It's almost like whereas in LA there's a lot of stuff coming to you. In Omaha, you almost have to bring what you're doing to other people.
Yeah, we definitely we would get, like I said, like kind of smaller like show touring bands, and I definitely saw some bands I really loved that way. But if we wanted to see like a big band, you were definitely driving to like either Lawrence or Chicago. Like when I went to see like The Cure when I was like 15, but it, like you drove 8 hours to Chicago if you wanted to like see The Cure. You weren't like coming to Omaha. So yeah.
Phoebe, how about yourself? Like, you're obviously from Los Angeles. There's a lot more bands coming to you. Did you find it, when you're trying to get your own sound out there, is it easier or is it harder because there's so much competition coming?
I mean, I think it's way different. I think I definitely felt super competitive. Like so many of my friends, and I went to an arts high school. So many of my friends were like dropping out and going on tour, and that's like all I wanted to do. And I was super jealous. And then, this band Kitten, my friend Chloe was in, they got signed when she was like 14 or something. Something insane. And yeah, I was just like super jealous. All I wanted to do was like get signed and escape. But it was also awesome because I didn't have to drive super far to see my favorite bands. I grew up going to like FYF or, like the weird, like was a punk festival inside the Echo in LA. That was pretty rough. That sucked. I saw bands I loved. I saw like Vivian Girls. I saw Ariel Pink, and that was really cool. But then also I saw like someone just like projecting really disturbing footage over. I was too young to leave too. I was like 15, and they were like, okay, well, no ins and outs for under 21. So I was like stuck there from like 2 p.m. to 2 a.m. It was pretty rough. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing kills a fun punk rock vibe by not being allowed to leave.
Yeah, like hiding in the corner and like eating pizza by yourself. Yeah.
Vivian Girls too, like that's a band that I think, doesn't get the credit they deserve as a punk rock band that kind of went out there and carved like a path for themselves.
Yeah, for sure. No, they were awesome. Yeah, that was like I definitely like stood at the lip of the stage during that show. It was like I was like a cartoon of myself watching like all these badass women play music. I was like, damn, someday, man.
Well, when did you so you're playing in this band? When did you decide like I got to do something different? I got to do something for me now?
Well, I kind of always was. Like I was playing in my own bands. Like I only played bass in Sloppy Jane. I was playing in my own bands with some embarrassing names. We had a version that was Phoebe and the He-Men. That was really weird.
That's a cool name.
Einstein's Dirty Secret, or
Einstein's Dirty Secret. Thanks for bringing that one up. Really appreciate it.
That's a great name.
Yeah, and we played like the Troubadour and more kind of like, pay to play rough fucking like shitty promoter venues. Yeah, and we would play like at the same night or there was this band called Hazel, which now it was basically like the musical stylings of my friend Angelica Garcia, who's super badass. And she plays under her own name now. But yeah, we like there were just a bunch of bands that all kind of like circulated around my high school, Loxa. Like Haim is from there, from Loxa.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was cool.
Is that like a pay to play thing? Like, is that common in Los Angeles to have to do those types of shows?
Yes, like the Whiskey. I don't know if the Troubadour still does it, but it would be like you can just like, yeah, you can pay to play pretty much anywhere. So brutal.
Whoa. Wait, so you're saying I could pay the Whiskey and then go cosplay a germ show?
Yeah, dude, do it.
Oh my god. I know what I'm doing when I win that lottery now. What you mentioned earlier, going to play those out of town shows really early on and doing those basement shows. Could you was there a sense of like a common scene that were going on in these places too, or is it very much like what was going on in Los Angeles and just like a real mix of stuff every place you're going?
Kind of. There's kind of like a Topanga Canyon scene of like folk punk. Or like West Side. Like there was a thing called Family Ride. Oh my god. It was like I grew up in the era of like everybody riding fixies everywhere.
Okay.
And so there was like a ride around LA where you could ride your bike to like 7-Eleven and see a band. And there were like 8 bands in one night. That was pretty weird. And yeah, it was kind of like folk punky almost. But my like boyfriend at the time was in a band called Pills. That was really funny. He graduated MIT for math. He's like very smart dude, but he was like one of the first people I knew who ever got Ableton. Yeah, pretty funny. But yeah, there were like a lot of scenes happening at once, and Loxa was kind of the same. My high school, like you could sit at the goth table, you could like be in the country scene. There's a country scene called like the Grand Ole Echo thing that would happen every Sunday at the Echo, where it's just like kind of ye old white dudes with their guitars like singing Waylon Jennings songs. But yeah, it was kind of like pick your poison. And then when we would go play in like Reseda and stuff, that was like trash can fires kind of scenes.
Mm-hmm. That's riding your bike to 7-Eleven to see a band play sounds like an awesome thing. You get a Slurpee and a band.
It was awesome. I saw Crystal Castles in like some sort of family ride related thing in like the back of some weird place. That was cool.
Whoa, so they'd actually have bigger bands do this thing too?
Occasionally, like secretly. I think I saw Classics weirdly like that too. Yeah, it was like yeah.
Oh, that sounds so awesome.
I was
How many
pretty
people?
tired on my bike at the end of the
Yeah,
night. I was
I guess
pretty
that's the
bummed.
problem. Yeah,
Yeah,
I guess it's a lot of work to kind of. It's much easier to just go to like a venue and then have all the bands
yeah,
just come to you.
exactly.
Connor, did you guys tour in that very first band that you were doing? Like you said, you meant played South by Southwest, but how much actual like touring did you do?
We toured a good bit, like, but it was always, I was still in high school, so it was obviously just like in the summer times. And I mean, I think I talked my way into like going to South by Southwest and going to like that was back when CMJ was still happening
Mm-hmm.
in New York. So yeah, my parents were real cool letting me skip school to do that sometimes. And then in the summer we would usually go, because the other guys in the band were, all like 5 years older than me or something. So they were, you know, whatever they were, like 19 or 20 or something,
Mm-hmm.
So when I think back, that was kind of crazy that my mom would let me like, you know, get in a van with. She must have really trusted. I think she did trust
Wait, I
us.
love
But
the story of your friends in a band like breaking down and just staying at your house for like weeks, and they were vegans and
Yeah.
made your mom like cook vegan food for them.
Yeah,
What band was that?
that was my friend Stephanie Druten Cincinnati. She has another name because she got married now, but she played bass with me. She's played in Bright Eyes a bunch and Good Life and a bunch of bands. But yeah, I met her when she was touring with her band, like when she was really young. I was probably 15 and she was probably like, I don't know, 17 or something. But she grew up in LA or like the Valley. And yeah, her band came through like middle of winter. I was still in high school. Their van broke down, and then there was probably, I think there was like 5 or 6 of them. They literally just lived at my parents' house for like a month, and I would like and like sleeping on the floor. And I would like get up and like go to high school and like come home and like there they were, and they like, yeah, they couldn't fix their van. They had no money. That was the first time I ever heard the word vegan. I was like, I don't know, that sounds like something from Star Trek. I don't know what they're talking about. And my sweet mother would like be like, I got this chicken. Is that vegan? And like, and like, she eventually figured it out. But yeah,
Well, your mom has the patience of a saint.
yeah,
Like, wow.
yeah. She was good. We always had like pretty open door policy when it came to bands touring, and yeah, it was always a good spot for people to crash.
When you're going out on those tours, what kind of scene did you guys get playing? Because I guess around that time there's like that Epiphat stuff that's happening in California. There's like some Chicago stuff happening, but like it feels like it was pretty disparate around America at that time, different places.
Yeah, I mean it was real random. I mean, as far as like the bands we would end up playing with and the places we would end up playing. I mean, we would play just anywhere. So it was a mixture of like kind of legit sort of like punk promoters, like, all ages spaces, to like just dumb bar band situations where no one cared at all. Eventually we kind of got a real booking agent, and then we would play like, college shows, and it started being more like what you would think of now as like going on tour. But I feel like
Hmm.
the early days were just like, who the hell knew what was going to happen? It was like people we had met, and this is kind of pre-internet, so it was like people that had like come through Omaha, and we had like befriended one of the bands, and they lived in whatever town, and like piecemealing like, you know tours. But your tour might be like, you might have like 5 days off in like Kalamazoo while you're waiting for the show, or whatever.
Yeah.
It was very, very random, and yeah, just like sleeping on people's floors, and the whole deal. So um yeah, I can remember actually one time actually with Steph's band too. She helped us get a show in LA once, and we played. I think we played like Spaceland, or we played someplace, or maybe it wasn't even Spaceland. It was like we played some random spot, and then after the show, this person came up to me and was like, "Oh, you should be playing at like what I can't remember the name, like some other like the library or whatever the name of the other club was, and like that's where all the emo bands play." And I was like, "The what?" She's like, "All the emo band," and I like distinctly remember that was the first time I'd ever heard that word, and I had no
Yeah.
idea what it meant. I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah," and then I had to like ask someone. I was like, "What does that mean?" And of course, got very different answers to what that meant. I still do, and I don't know what it means, but yeah, I guess it means having emotion in your music, but it seems like unless you're Devo, you should have emotion in your music, but yeah,
You're right.
I
Devo's
don't
the
know.
only band that's like anti-emotion in their music.
Yeah.
But it's funny, yeah. Emo. I remember it would have been, pre-codification of that. Where it's like, it's like, oh, it's the stuff coming from DC. It's like, no, no, no. It's the stuff coming from California and ebullition stuff, and it's
I mean,
very amorphous.
I like in my mind it was that it's like a sound, and this is just my take on it, but it was like I always think of it as like Sunny the Real Estate and all the bands that sounded like that kind of like loud, hard, loud, like stretching out the words to like you can't even know what the word is because it's like they hold the words out so long, and that kind of like like that's what and like there was tons of that shit like in the 90s, like in the Midwest and everywhere. I mean, Sunny Day was from like Seattle or something, right? But anyway, like that's what I sort of think of, but I know it goes back before that. Like people will be like Rites of Spring and whatever, like Minor Threat. I mean, but is that punk rock? Is that I don't know, but
I remember reading a really well-worded essay in Max and Rock and Roll in someone's column about how Black Flag was the first emo band. And
yeah, I mean, I feel like it's very like once you get in the weeds, it's kind of hard to know what to call anything and like the genres of genres, and then it turned into like Hot Topic, like Guyliner, like huge pop bands. It was like emo, which also didn't make any sense. And then all my music was also emo, even though we didn't sound like any of that at all. We just were weird. We had like weird acoustic guitars, and
You did wear guyliner.
I did wear some guyliner, but yeah.
But so did Mike Ness.
Yeah.
From Social Distortion, right?
Totally.
So that's in a punk rock tradition too.
Yeah.
Were you using Book Your Own? Sorry, go on.
No, I was just gonna say. I was just gonna randomly say Billy Joe about Guyliner, but it didn't help our conversation much. Billy Joe. For the rest of this podcast, I'm just gonna say Billy Joe from time to time.
Sick.
Just to remind us why we're here.
Why we're all here.
Well, that ultimately he's a huge reason of why I'm here. So I definitely need to be reminded of that.
Yeah, I love Green Day.
Absolutely,
genuinely do.
Were you speaking of Max and Rock and Roll though? Were you using Book Your Own Fucking Life for these tours too?
We
definitely.
Yes, I do know what you're talking about. I'm chewing on some avocado toast right now. I'm sorry.
Do not worry. It sounds delicious. I didn't mean that because you're chewing. I meant it sounds delicious to the concept of eating avocado toast right now.
So you're chewing.
It sounds delicious. No, we definitely had access to that. Like I feel like they had that at the record store I was talking about. And we maybe used that a little bit. I feel like we kind of it was more like random connections we had made, like just from like bands coming through Omaha, making friends with bands that came, and like I mean, this was like we were like people were like writing letters to each other and stuff, and like sending tapes to each other, and this is like ancient. This is like the 1800s to Phoebe. She's never heard of. So a letter is where you take a piece of paper, fold it up, stick it in the thing. But no, so like, yeah, it was definitely piecemeal, but I do remember that book, and we probably like randomly sent our tapes to like clubs using that book for sure.
Yeah. At one point that was like the Twitter of the time, right? Like that was the way to get in touch with people around the world was
Oh,
sending a
I
letter.
finally understand. Okay. Cool.
I wasn't trying to. I was saying that for myself to try and remember the old times because I'm only 21
No,
myself.
this is
You're entering into an ongoing riff between us.
yeah, this is a constant riff. We've been doing a lot of interviews, and everyone wants to talk about like how old I am, basically, and how young Phoebe is, and a lot of Twitter jokes going on. But
Well, it's funny because you brought up earlier, Connor, like, you know, you are running off with these like 19-year-old kids when you're 15, but like punk is this weird neverland where it's completely age, it seems to disappear a little bit, you know, and like I remember being like 14, being like, Mom, this is my 30-year-old friend who's going to come over to the house and make me a tape. And my mom's like, okay, sure.
No, totally. I mean, I think that music does that. It's like one of the great things about music is it kind of breaks down all that, you know, age isn't really that important. Like one of my best friends, like I lost him last year, but like he had been, you know, my best friend for like 10 years is this dude, Gary Burden, who's like a art director, like made all these dope, like all like the Neil Young artwork and all this shit. Anyway, he was like, you know, he was like 84 when he passed, but like when we were friends for like, you know, I mean, literally, he's like one of my best friends, and he was like in his 70s, and it never occurred to me like how old he was because we talked about music, we went to shows, we like hung out and smoked weed
Absolutely.
and listened to records, you know.
Yeah, it's kind of like our relationship.
Yeah.
Like I just never even think about it, even though you were born in like 1810. It's crazy.
Exactly.
Yeah, I wouldn't know what that's like because I'm just a kid myself, even though I'm actually 1 year older than Connor.
But yeah, I think it's cool that about music. Yeah.
Absolutely. Phoebe, when you get signed to Paxam, was there like you know that obviously that's like a huge label, like you know run by Ryan Adams, but was there like attention on the music you were doing before that? Like, what did you feel like at a point like, oh geez, like I'm like my friend in high school is gonna get signed to a label, like I've got people looking at what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I met Ryan at a really, really weird time where I was actually kind of talking to a lot of labels.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of just like but I wanted to make a full-length album, and I was having a hard time like finding people that I gelled with on it. And then finally would meet Tony Berg actually like a couple days before I met Ryan. So and Tony Berg produced my first record. And then I met Ryan, and it was kind of like, hey, like while you're dealing with all that fucked up weird like label shit, or like, you know, people I didn't really know what I was doing, and people kind of didn't know what I was doing. Like some people were like, oh cool, it's like Sheryl Crow or whatever. and then I met Ryan, and he was like, oh no, it's cool, we'll just record for literally 20 minutes on a tape machine, and it'll be out like next month.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty rad because it kind of like people heard it, people found me through it, and kind of were like, oh, I get what you're trying to do. Yeah.
How did labels first find out about you? Is it just from like, slugging it out, doing it, or was there like a moment you felt that like attracted the people's attention to your music?
Yeah, I mean that's another crazy thing about living in LA and also having so many friends in bands. Like I
Mm-hmm.
had friends in bands be like, you should go to Room 5 and check out my friend Phoebe, which is a venue with literally like 20 chairs in it above a restaurant that I played
Yeah.
all the time. I play like every Monday. It's just so it's such a weird universe. I met Linda Perry when I was really young. And she was like trying to get me to write with her, and just like it's such a weird, like so weird and giant but also so small. Like I meet so many people now that I met when I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it must have been wild to be like, yeah, a teenager and have all this pressure. Like, yeah, Linda Perry, a huge songwriter that's worked with like how many hit artists, and not to mention her band itself, uh, coming up to you. Like, you got music producers. Like, it must be hard to kind of like retain, like you're saying, your own vision.
Yeah, it was hard, and I think it was just self-imposed pressure, honestly. Yeah, because I remember they were like at my school, they were like scouting for The Voice and stuff. I was like, I know I didn't want to do that. Yeah, but it was weirdly like I had kind of like the opposite of a punk rock upbringing. I had like kind of a very corporate, like
Corporate piggy.
I'm a corporate pig. Yeah, so it was kind of hard to like find
Industry plan.
like it was hard to want to make music more than I wanted to have music, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
it was hard to remind myself that I like actually think music is super cool when, you know, you're like out to dinner with some label dude who's like, you know what would be actually better for your brand is if you like tweeted Elliott Smith lyrics more. That was a real life thing that happened to me when I was like 19.
Oh my God.
I know, dude. So people are so fucking out of touch. It's insane.
And so, like, were these labels like hoping to sign you and then kind of mold you into some other like thing from the sounds of it?
I think so, but again, like I didn't really know what I was doing. I wasn't really playing with a band at that point. I was just playing like an acoustic guitar. I'm so glad I met Tony when I did, because
Mhm.
he is such a weirdo. Like he was ready to like have it not be a real genre. and just like start recording the songs and like fuck around. And then after I put out the Pac Sam 7-inch, I had an agent and I started getting like real tour offers, and I played with like Violent Femmes and I was like touring at the same time as like finishing my record, so it took forever, which was actually great because I got to kind of like figure it out as I went along.
So you were touring with the Violent Femmes before your record's done. Like, you don't have anything. Do you have anything out at that point?
Well, I just had the Pac Sam 7-inch.
The Pac Sam 7-inch. So what was it like playing to those? You know, because obviously, I imagine a Violent Femmes fan base is fairly dyed in the wool at this point. What's it like going and performing for them as kind of an unknown commodity?
Fucking horrible.
Yeah,
It was the
I can
worst.
imagine.
People were like, "Get this shit out of my ears right now."
Ugh.
Yeah, but I mean, I also played with like Julian Baker. Thank God,
Mhm.
like right before that, because I needed to like feel good about myself. But yeah, I got like torn apart by like 3,000 people. It was rough. It was just like me and a guitar. But then I would play with Julian, who I think is like super punk rock.
Yes. She was just on the show last week.
Oh, sick! Yay!
Yeah,
No, she's
a
so
great
punk.
episode. Absolutely.
And we were playing like grimy ass punk clubs, and she was just like silencing them like it was church. It was
Mhm.
so crazy. I also played with Mitski in a similar environment where it was like just kids that look like they're, you know, going to the smell to like mosh. We're just sitting on the floor of grimy venues, like watching with like huge eyes and like sobbing. Is really special.
That's why I think X-Boy Genius X too, like with, you know, using the, Boy Genius, using the X-Boy Genius X, like, you know, talking about punk rock. I think it's like, once again, expanding this genre to what it was in the beginning. And like, you know, Connor, Bright Eyes did this as well, and the Faint stuff too. But like, it's just like, it's not like, the thing that makes this thing special is it doesn't have to be one set of rules. Like this should be a genre that's just like all of us kind of like, you know, coming from the same place, but ultimately doing whatever we want to do.
Yeah, well, like non-conformist, right? I mean, isn't that the whole
Mhm.
idea of like punk rock? It's like you don't gotta be like everyone else. You don't gotta, you know, dress like everybody else. You don't gotta think like everybody else. You know, I think that's like that's the heart of it. And yeah, you're right. I think it can manifest itself in like, you know, sonically or stylistically in like a lot of different ways, but I think it's really like, yeah, it's probably more a mindset than it is like a sound at this point, you know?
Mhm. I think the first time I saw you play was like at More Than Music Festival
Okay, where
years
was
ago.
that?
And is that the one in Columbus, Ohio?
Ooh, you
It
got
was,
me, but that sounds right.
I think the Faint, I think like the Faint played too, and then they backed
Okay,
you up, maybe
okay.
way back when. But what was it like? You know, Bright Eyes is going out and playing in the beginning, and it's the late '90s. You know, like what were those? Like, how did you guys fit into the hardcore scene and the scene that was happening in the beginning at that point?
I mean, we were very, I think, not typical to most of the bills we got put on. It would be, you know, rock bands essentially, like pretty loud on, hardcore, which is another term that I always don't know what that means. Hardcore, but whatever. Like that, like yeah, loud rock bands, I would say most of the time. And we were like sitting in chairs. I was playing like an acoustic guitar. I mean, granted, it was like a lot of times like through amps and distortion pedals and stuff, but yeah, it was like we were kind of weird for at that moment for what we were doing. And I guess I always thought of it was like kind of folk music, just like experimental folk, whatever. But I definitely screamed. So I mean that, and we had loud parts to our songs at times. So, but we were always like changing our band and fucking around and I mean, I don't know. I feel like we sounded like we were pretty schizophrenic as far as like a band went. We tried a lot of different shit, and a lot of times it was like massive like failures, but like we were having fun and we were keeping ourselves entertained. And I mean, I guess at the core of it, it was like, whatever, my songs. So it was kind of like whatever songs I was writing and then getting like whatever friends I had around to like play them with me. It wasn't very thought out.
It's funny because both of you come from almost like completely different environments to where you found your sounds, right? Like it seems like Connor, yours, like not to say that there wasn't any pressure, but like it feels like, you weren't under the watchful eyes of a music industry trying to like figure yourself out. Whereas Phoebe, it seems like almost not right from the get-go, but at a certain point, all eyes are on you and people are already trying to put their hands into your art.
Yeah.
We talk about that a lot, just the sort of difference between growing up LA versus Omaha, and there's advantages to both. And I definitely like, even though there is all this stuff we're talking about in LA, there's also like amazing fucking music that comes out of there. It's not all like, manicured by the industry or anything like that. But it is a different world and you're exposed to different stuff. And I mean, we just didn't have really any kind of infrastructure or way. I mean, everything was just like, if you wanted to do it, you kind of had to do it yourself. And it wasn't like, it's cool to do it yourself. It was like, there was no other choice. It was like, there's just no one's going to give a shit ever, So I think we just, like, our friends, that's why we started putting out music, basically.
Phoebe, when you met Julian, did you kind of feel like now you'd found like the kindred spirit? Like you felt like this was you building a scene almost?
Yes. Resentfully so, almost. Because like 3 people sent me her album the same week that were all like, you'll love this. I was like, great. A chick singer-songwriter. Thank you. Like, and I didn't listen to it.
Yeah.
And then I listened to it and I was fucking floored. And it was so crazy. And I saw her again in kind of like a weird spot in Eagle Rock. And just, it was like the first time I opened for her in LA. And I just was like floored. And then she opens her mouth to talk and she talks like me. She's like, what up, dude? And like doesn't take herself too seriously. And it definitely was. It was the first time I ever felt like I met like a real peer. Yeah, and she kind of had a similar thing. Like she had a band in high school that wanted to sound like the Killers as much as my band in high school wanted to sound like the Killers. And even though she was from Memphis, she was definitely like going on tours, and it seemed like our vibe was kind of similar. And then we both like deleted the band and just kind of like started from scratch to see what we sounded like, really. We're like, so cool.
Was that like a weird step to take? Like obviously you're friends with someone. Like did you know right from the beginning like, oh, it's going to work us collaborating, or is that like was it like a feeling out process creatively?
Dude, the idea for the band is so crazy because she just one day to Lucy was like, I really just want to back someone up. I just want to like play guitar for once. And so I think we had never really thought about it. Like we'd sang together like live. We sang at Eau Claire this year, but the band, the band just kind of happened to us. which is so cool. Like we all happened to be, we're like, oh, maybe we'll cover a song or something, and then it just gelled so fast. Like there was no pressure on us to do it, and that was part of why it was so great. It just was so fun and cool because nobody was like making us do it. We weren't even like stressed about it. It just kind of happened.
And so how does that, collaborative process compare to like what, Connor and yourself are doing right now? Like even like coming together, how did that differ for you?
Well, I think actually it was kind of the same in the beginning. Like there was no pressure on Connor and I to like do anything. Just one day
Mm.
after a show in Europe, Connor was like, "Oh man, we should start a band that sounds like the Replacements." I don't know if we succeeded, but we like love the Replacements.
See,
Yeah,
it does
and
always come back to punk.
yeah, it does. Uh, and then just as, like creatively, I mean, I made the Boy Genius record the first like 5 days in June, and then I made this record with Connor like the rest of the days. So it felt like weirdly similar, but the age gap is cool and fun and different, and like we the engineer Andy Lemaster has made like a million records with Connor. It was cool making a record that's basically like my third ever thing with someone who's made like 45,000 records before. Yeah, it was different just because like he's doing the thing that I like, just a lot more years and of experience.
Mm. How about with yourself, Connor? Like, what's the difference when you go into a collaboration process versus when you're doing something on your own?
Well, I mean, besides like, I've been in bands where it's like you write the song in the practice space and like everyone's like, you kind of jam out the song. So I've done that, but outside of that, I haven't really made. I mean, I've made some songs over the years with people, but I've never made like a whole record with another songwriter, like writing all the songs together. And it was really it was really cool. Just we didn't like exchange stuff over the internet or like bring in finished songs. It was like very much like sitting with our guitars and like our notebooks and like writing the songs together. So that was like kind of the coolest part about it to me. And then yeah, just like, I mean, Phoebe's like super like naturally gifted like producer. Like she thinks about, she had like amazing ideas for like arrangements and sonic stuff, like even as you're writing the songs. And she's like a probably much more kind of naturally gifted singer than I am. So like she got me like singing harmony and yeah, I don't know, I feel like kind of tried to like play to each other's strengths and like make something that we wouldn't have been able to make on our own or whatever. So it's cool.
Was that like a conscious decision you both had where you're like, we don't want this to be where we're bringing in parts of songs or sketches of songs and we're collaborating over the internet? We want to do this as like a real band.
No, the opposite. I feel like we're like, yes, send me ideas, and we just never did. Yeah, total accident.
Well, it's a happy accident then, right?
Yeah, for sure. It was a cool like difference between bands for me, for sure.
And so like now that you guys have done this, you're touring this? Are you gonna tour?
Yeah, we tour in March, April, and then May in Europe.
Yeah.
But you guys have been on tour together, so it's not like, I guess it'll change in the sense that you now have to go on the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So we have our first show tomorrow, or is it tomorrow?
No, 2 days.
In 2 days, our first show is the fucking Colbert TV show, so we're kind of nervous.
We have this riff where like with the band that didn't even play on the record. We have like a different live band, and I love them all. But we're like, man, it's been so long time coming since like our mom's basement 10 years ago.
Yeah, we just remember the days in the garage. We finally made it. Yeah, it'll be cool though. So yeah, we're doing a couple little things. Like the record comes out obviously like in a couple days, and then but the real tour, yeah, is like March, April, May.
And so, like, beyond this, is there plans to do other things, or is this like you kind of want to do this as a one-off thing and then go back to your respective other projects, right? Because I guess that's the double-edged sword of doing something like this. Like, do you want it to carry on forever, or do you just do it as a one-off?
I mean, I think, we obviously both have other stuff kind of going on. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think we've really thought that far ahead. It's like the record's just coming out. I mean, I think assuming we stay friends and
Don't fuck up.
no, I mean, I would always love to make music with Phoebe. I mean, I think it'd be rad if we made another record, but definitely like not thinking that far down the line at this point yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't mean to jump that far ahead because
Yeah.
you're just doing your first show and all.
Yeah, I don't want to do like any more charity work after this,
Yeah, I'm just trying to revitalize my career by riding Phoebe's coattails for a second. So as soon as I get my career back, you'll never see me again.
Yeah. No, but you're welcome,
Well, if you ever need a guy to do shouting parts, I need a career revitalization too over here. So I'm down.
Awesome.
So yeah, I guess like, from places where you guys started to be at the Colbert Report, it's like amazing how the pressures have probably changed. But at the same time, I can imagine it's still the same sort of butterflies in the stomach as the first time you played a show, no matter what the venue is.
Yeah, I always get nervous. Like I mean, TV is different, or like cameras and that stuff makes me like doubly nervous. But I also find that like weirdly, like smaller shows sometimes make me more nervous when you can really see everyone like looking at you and like see all their faces. Like sometimes at like festivals and stuff, it's just like everyone just looks like wallpaper, and it doesn't really feel like it's like kind of like whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I still always get nervous for every show, like at least a little bit before I go on, which
if I don't get nervous, I'm freaked out because then I'm just like tired. Has that ever happened to you? Where you like don't get nervous and then you're like, it's like, the 86th show into tour or whatever always, but I like getting nervous.
Yeah, nothing's worse than being exhausted on stage. So yeah, nervous, at least you have that energy.
Exactly.
Kind of feed off. Well, thank you both so much for coming on the show. And I'd love to interview both of you in the future separately, or if you do another record together, but separately would be great too. Would you, either of you or both of you, come back in the future for a part 2?
Hell yeah.
Of course. Count me in.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for coming on the show. And yeah, the new record's amazing.
Yeah, thanks, dude.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Phoebe and Connor and Phoebe, thank you so much for coming on the show. That is a huge thrill. Thank you once again to everyone that made that possible and busted their butts. And of course, Connor and Phoebe for coming on the show. And they'll be back for part 2s individually. You heard that at some point. But a huge honor to get them on the show. Digital Sex. Check out Digital Sex. Great band. Obscure band, but great band. If you can hear it, definitely hear it. That's it. Okay, on to episode 200. So here's the plan. In next week, there will be no Turned Out a Punk proper, right? We're going to have a week off. There's going to be a Turned Out a Punk footnotes. There's going to be this big celebration on Turned Out a Punk footnotes and a bunch of stuff going on there. And then I'm going to be coming back in 2 weeks with a very special Turned Out a Punk episode 0. It's also going to be a cool episode with a bunch of people coming back on for some reflections leading up to episode 200. I'm going to make a big deal of this thing. Why not? Episode 200, big deal for me. I've never stuck to anything this long except for, being a parent and, being in a band. I guess I stuck with that pretty long too. But anyway, so yeah, I'm going to make a big deal of this thing. So we're going to celebrate this thing. And so 2 weeks, it's going to be episode 0. Recently uncovered Sandy Miranda, the archivist, the genius, the amazing bass player and Fucked Up. Discovered an old interview that I did that she recorded with a very requested guest. A very, very requested guest. So we will be getting to that in 2 weeks on the show. And there'll also be some other people coming back on for some reflections leading up, because in 3 weeks, I guess, it's going to be the real episode 200. Episode 200 in 3 weeks is going to be featuring Well, me. Jonah Falco, former guest, drummer of Fucked Up, someone who's known me for probably the longest other than my brother, but that's for another episode. Jonah, who's been on the show before, is going to do a Turn Out a Punk with me, and a lot of people have tried to do this. I don't think anyone's done it like this is going to be. This is going to be a fantastic episode, and so you're going to want to hear it. That's it. Thank you very much to Vans for supporting this show. Thank you to you for listening to this show. Tell all your friends. Please go out there and make your own culture. Sign your organ donor cards. Check in on your friends. And yeah, I love you. Stay safe. Thank you for listening. And I will see you, well, next week with Footnotes, but 2 weeks with Turn It a Punk episode 0. And then 3 weeks, I can't believe I'm saying this, episode 200.